Okay, so I think now it's recording. Well, let's then start a little bit with this connection between the topics. With Stefan, you saw a lot about welfare analysis, the negative externalities, the cost-benefit analysis, and all those instruments go directly on the policies. What you will see with me today is the development of the environment movement, how it become international agreements or global agreements like the SDGs, like the Paris Agreement, and how then it can be the frame for the development of national policies at country level. Having seen that, you then dive in social learning tools and how the social learning can help to integrate people and communities and the development of policies, and why this is so important to avoid policy failure. What I wanted to also tell you as a lecture here is that you can stop anytime and interrupt me and bring some connections with your examples, with your experience. We saw on the first day with the presentation that we have 9 countries here with very different cultural background, but with also a completely different context. And as well, we have very different professionals. We have engineers, we have sociologists. So the force here for me is try to integrate and make a frame of content that can be useful for everybody, but it will be very useful if you bring your own examples and you also engage your own experience, so I can also shape more more globally or more specifically in case of country examples, especially if we have the same experience. In our research group, we are working with in many different countries with projects about sustainable land use. So eventually I can use specific examples, otherwise I will keep more neutral examples that everybody can follow. Good. Do you have any questions or expectations that you want to share? In the first day, you said that you were also looking for also this kind of examples of things and how things can be transformed. That's what I had in my book as a expectation of you. So if you have more expectations, I think it's good that you, to warm up, say something about what is coming in the next 3 lectures.
I can say something if you like. Wait, me.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope everything is okay. And thanks for being here to teach us today. I would say I'm really interested in like the idea of like global environmental governance. And I know you said we're gonna look at things from the country level. So I'm maybe interested to see how countries like interact, and yeah, like how like these multinational agreements work and how they're binding or if they're not binding, or I don't know, things like challenges related to global environmental governance is something that I would be interested to learn about.
Good.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. That's good to know. Then I also know another examples to bring to the frame that I have prepared. Thank you.
And maybe to chip in here, it was also a big, I would say, suggestion from the students to have maybe always one paper before in order to better prepare the content of the next lecture. And maybe we can also deal with this, no? That's just as one paper as an introduction to come into the topic earlier than the lecture is. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. That's I also think it's super important. I totally agree. This is prepared for the next lecture. Just since today is really the first introduction, it's also a little bit shorter lecture than the next one and the other one. So it's also you have content to check things that we talked today, but also for the next lecture. When I finish the lecture today, then I will put there all the slides and all the text that you can, articles that you can read to have an overview of the next content and what we are talking today. Thank you very much, Stefan, for bringing me this point. It's prepared, not for today, but for the next lecture, because today it's really the overview of all the structures, but I can recommend something, especially regarding the evolution of the environmental movements and how to become then policies and international agreements. Any other one wants to share expectations? Okay, so I will start to share here. Screen. And here we go. So, as you already know, this lecture is about global challenge, which I will very briefly bring some data. Then you have the Sustainable Development Agenda and the social learning concept and application as a key tools for socio-environmental policies. And here also is important, before to start, say that the cross with social issues is all the time coming in my lecture, because this is the overview that we'll have to looking as environmental policies implementation. You're looking for people implementation. So you always have the social issue very clear on the set, how people implement this, how much they accept this, how you can better implement, and this is all embedded on the social context. So that's why the environmental policy here has a focus on social environmental topics. Yeah. Next. So the agenda. And the first part today, we'll see very briefly global challenge, some data about how the evolution of the global challenges are going to the bad, from the bad part and also the good part, the evolution of the Sustainable Development Agenda and how it comes to the national levels. The second part, then, it's more focused on the social learning as an approach to do a better implementation of environmental policies. The perception studies, so here we dive in concepts, because many people talk about perceptions, but most of the time we don't know how many different concepts we have and how deep psychological and cognitive process perception can be, and how we can study this better. And I will have the examples as last Monday. I remember you have questions about the questionnaires and how we can use this with real cases. So I have some examples of surveys here that we can analyze more already than in the third part, where we go for practical examples, how we do the research to integrate people and policy implementation. So we have then examples of perception studies and social learning process implementation. Then we go specifically for the methods, when we use, how we use, and we do some exercise during the whole lecture. We do some strategic exercise that you can feel more connected with the topic, with me here talking. Part one, global challenge. I think everybody hears a lot about how many problems we have in terms of environmental challenge or sustainability challenges. And here I just brought some data that we have 54% of accessible groundwater, consuming over 54% of accessible runoff water in the world. We destroyed 180 square meters of tropical rainforest, and here it's a double effect, as most of the challenges, the double effect or the causal chains of the degradation of natural resources, land use change, as example, the destruction of tropical forests, are one of the key drivers of emissions. Land use change is represent 25% of the emissions at global level. So all those effects of cutting forests or the destruction of especially rainforests and peatlands impact not only on the double emissions, but also in soil degradation and so on and so on. So all the data here of the global challenge, like we also have a special topic is the erosion of soil with most than 80 million tons of topsoil, and all those data of global challenge, they are integrated and interconnecting, doing like a extra speed because of the causal change of these effects of environmental issues and natural sources degradation. On top of it, we have the hunger issue, which is now from the last, you can see here on the data, on the last state of food insecurity and nutrition from the FAO, it's now declared that we have officially an increase of hunger. In the last two decades until 2015, we have a decrease of hunger, which was a big achievement of all the efforts to do a better nutrition around the world and to focus also in Sub-Saharan Africa programs and so on. Latin America had also evolved a lot in terms of do a better nutrition and programs for food security until 2015. On 2015, at global level, here I'm talking, there is a sequence of hits in terms of climate events. And now is for the fourth time in sequence that we have an increase on the data in hunger on the world. So which from the official document of FAO constitutes an increase in hunger, an accurate increase in hunger at the global level. So this is the bad news. We have on top of it a crisis of obesity, which is constitute 12% of global population, and 33% of our food is wasted, which clearly indicate a failure of our food systems. We have an epidemic, obesity epidemic, we have a hunger epidemic, and we have 30% of the food being wasted. And this, with this key data, there is a lot of environmental programs that combine food security with the environmental issues, and this is part of our set of projects. You see, when I bring also the examples of our research and programs, that we work a lot with food security and combine this with environmental good practice, which is also embedded in the sustainable development. So here you have some key documents that what I will recommend you to read, and I will let it all uploaded on the Moodle. This is what we have currently. Globally, future challenges is also about which kind of a scenario will be the concrete one for climate change. This has come a question. Have you been already researching the IPCC reports where they have the 4 scenarios with what is expected in case of the different emissions at global level? Have you been already seeing these documents, IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change?
Yeah, a little bit, I think. I mean, it's been a while,
Yes.
but I'm aware of them.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, we have 4 scenarios there, and it's according what is expected or what is possibly expected at global level in terms of emissions. And you have the first scenario, it's that we will increase our temperature in 0.2. The second scenario is a 1 degree increasing until 2100. And the third scenario is 2.5, and the fourth scenario is 3.9. You can, that's also I recommend. I can upload some small versions. It's a huge global document that also guide many policies. So it's important that you at least have a view on it. Also some specific terms. This guides a lot of the policies that we will see here also in terms of expectation. And globally, the agreement is that we try to reach the second scenario, but if we continue the emissions as it's now, we will probably have more than 3 degrees increased temperature in 2100. This will put a lot of pressure because changing the climate, you change a lot of the ecosystems and the production systems and so on. On top of it, and that's what the graphic are showing here, we have a big increase of population also expected, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and in some countries in Asia, which the big prognosis is that by 2050 we will have 9 billion people in our planet. So having a different change on ecosystems and production systems and an increase of population change a lot all the systems and the production that we have nowadays. This is the global scenario. This is more or less sometimes a pessimistic view, but this is the data and also based a lot of on simulation. With the big force of environmental policies is trying to change this. And why we start to talk about this? Because what we see nowadays trying to cope with this global challenges is, especially at global level, the Paris Agreement, which have many mechanisms like red mechanisms that we will talk later on, and the SDGs. Those are the main documents at global level. But those documents or those agreements have a large or a very long story, a large process behind. And that's what I wanted to bring you here. I think there is a lot of critics. Always after the summit, we have a very strong reaction that it's not enough, and I partly agree that we need to do more. But there is an entire history of story of the evolution of those documents, and the machine behind to create this, it's very huge. And that's what I bring you, how when it starts more or less to be discussed in the evolution, the key global documents, how we arrive to the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Sorry. Okay, hope I don't have problems with this open here. So have you a little bit when we start to have a clear environmental movement, because of course there is a lot of, when you read about, and you see also in this document that I'm sharing with you about the overview of the social environmental policies, that many different authors in the beginning of the last century start to talk about the limits of our natural resources. We have the tragedy of commons. Who already heard about the tragedy of commons? Is it anyone familiar with the tragedy of commons? Okay.
Yes.
No, I will. Sorry.
Yeah, I am at least. I think we learned about it in another class like last week, but I'm not. It might have even been economics, but I'm not sure. So I think some of us at least have heard of it for sure.
I also heard about it before.
Good.
Is it okay if we
Okay.
just respond with like a hand motion? Because like I really don't like the idea of like interrupting just for that. Like, so then you can have an idea of how many people know.
Sorry, sorry, I didn't understand your comment.
Like when we have questions like this, is it okay if we just like have like a icon to like thumbs up or something so that you have an idea? Because then I think like us having to unmute and respond is a little like just like I don't know. I'd
Okay,
rather
okay.
you lecture and then get an idea of who knows.
Okay, let's do it this way. So the tragedy of commons, I will explain also more in the lecture about governance, because this is a basic theory which started in the end of the 90s 84, which was the first time that someone talked about this strategy of commons. I will show you a little video and animation where it's a basic concept, but you will hear a lot about this. Is exactly shows what is behind the idea of negativity externalities. Is when you have a common that is used so much by specific individuals that you have all the population paying the cost of it. So it was settled as economic concept at the beginning, and around 1950s it's return or is revisited as a concept more focused on the environmental issue. So this cross between economics and environmental issues are more mixed in the beginning of the last century, and the middle of the last century we start with then a specific focus on the environmental issues. Is also when you see in a stereotype picture of what happened in this moment is the hippie movements around the 60s and 70s is when the people start to think about the nature as an important issue. And some key documents here are the Silent Springs. It's a book by Rachel Carlson. Is where the first time she's from Berkeley University, and it's a still very current book. If you want to have a look, I really recommend. It's the first time where all this information about how toxic, for example, the agro industry and the agriculture is for the nature and for the human beings. So this brings a very clear claim of be focused on the environmental issues by the side of the government. So there is there is a civil pressure for environmental issues, and now here I'm telling you like an overview, a story, but the process is multiple. So there was issues from different countries differently, but globally there was this pressure from the public to have more focus on environmental issues. And the first key document globally was called The Limits of Growth. This document brings a very clear statement that we will run out of natural resources globally if we don't take care of the environmental issues. And this settled the first global document with a lot of experts. Maybe you already hear about this as a report of the Club of Rome project. And it was launched in 72, after 10 years after the book. So those are the key documents that more or less are a milestone on the development of environmental policies at global level or global agenda. After that, you have then the first Bortland Commission report, where officially the term sustainable development was created and defined, which is then evolved and had a lot of critics, but this was the first time where people think about the future generations, that we consume enough to save our own life, but also consider the future generations. This was another global key document. And then we have our common future, which was a precursor of the Agenda 21. We have in between these two, and as a preparation for the Agenda 21 was the Earth Summit, which is called ECO 92. I don't know if you hear about this. Those are very old. I think for the average of our the age here, it's very past documents, but the Agenda 21 was the precursor of the SDGs, and I will look specifically and what it was, how it was framed and what it was proposed. And then we have the Millennium Declaration, which was already an evolution of the Agenda 21. We will also look at specifically what was proposed on this documents, and finally we arrive in 2015 in the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Any comment, question? So let's talk about the Agenda 21. And here you can see a little bit what I was saying before, that we have a long process, at least now around 50 years, 5 decades, trying to develop something that creates some consensus among different nations in very different countries. So it's important that you recognize this process behind. Also to criticize, but with a consistent understanding of the larger process behind. So the Agenda 21 had 4 sections. The first was focused on the social and economic dimensions. You see here that those big spheres, these 2 big issues, social and economics, they were merged. So this was already a way to find a kind of agreement. So it was much more superficial of what we have nowadays, and was very focused in combating poverty in developing countries. They here discuss also consumption patterns, even though it was focused in developing countries, which constitute a kind of also contradiction for this time of the history, because consumption patterns should be more questioned in this moment on the developed countries. Promote health, sustainable population, sustainable segment on decision making. As you see here, as a big package for all this. Section 2 was conservation and management of resources for development. Here you have a clearly focus on environmental issues, and there was here also very clear focus in biodiversity and deforestation. What you see in those times when I was living and was on the school, the Agenda 21 was the same, had the same advertiser, the same promotion as the SDGs, but in that time. So what you see was a lot of programs on the schools at national levels, focus on biodiversity. It was one of the key strategies of the Agenda 21. The section 3 was strengthening the role of major groups. So here what they try is there was the first time of discussing at a global level the gender issue, for example. It focused very much in women instead the gender equality as we will see nowadays, but it was the first time where we bring an umbrella to embrace the minorities. And finally, the four is the means of implementation. So technology, transfer, education, international institutions. So this was the precursor of the environmental, the sustainable development goals. But before, we already have another evolution, which was the Millennium Declaration. I think maybe here you're already familiar or saw already some of those, at least those graphics about the goals that they have in this moment. The Millennium Declaration, you see, is already more sophisticated. Instead, 4 sections has 8 more clear targets, which was then already the eradication of extreme poverty and hunger, which is also very different, but they put here together. You see that with SDGs, this become much more complex. The achievement of primary education, promote gender equality and empowered women. You see here, there is already evolution of the minority groups, but focus much more on gender. Reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, because when this I have to bring the context, and this time we have a very high children mortality. So we have from 8, we have basically 2, the 5 and 4, and also connected with the first goal, you have a very focus on fighting child mortality, and you see that there was results on it. This decade was a huge improvement on decreasing child mortality. Then you have HIV, malaria, and other disease, combat those disease. You also see a very clear decrease of those disease, a better treatment, much less prejudice on the people that bring those disease. The environmental sustainability, you see they put sustainability and environmental together. So the 7 and the environmental issue was much less strong on this new global agreement. And finally, development, a global partnership for development. With those here is a kind of evolution of the section 4 of the Agenda 21. Any questions?
I would have a question regarding Agenda 21. Like in section 3, it's mentioned that the role of as well minority groups should be strengthened. Were they kind of as well included in the development process of the Agenda 21, which might then be the first most important step?
Yeah, like giving yourself the example, so you bring the minorities to develop their own document. Yeah, no, I think if I get well your question, is about how they were included in the development of this document.
Yes.
Yeah, and that moment, the Agenda 21 was officially launched. Like, that's never the day that it launches. Of course, it's not the day where it was developed, so it was years before. And here they include NGOs, but we also have to think that in this moment, the NGOs universe was not as developed as nowadays. If nowadays you say that NGOs were included to represent part of the minorities, it will have a much bigger representativeness than in this moment. So that was one of the main critics, and I think you bring very well that here also the way of the minorities were treated was as a global pact, which was mentioned there, but was not clearly specified how you're gonna engage then on the development of the documents. To be focused on your question, was through the integration of NGOs, but there was we know that NGO do not represent, for example, a indigenous community. We have now evolutions of communities that organize themselves as an NGO to have a representativeness on the discussions, but at that point we didn't have a lot of inclusion of the minorities by themselves, but more represented by the NGOs. Is it clear for you, the answer?
Yes, thanks.
Good, welcome. So after the Millennium Declaration was also those critics that was very little focus on environmental issues. As you see clearly here, you have only one goal talking clearly about the environmental issues. And there was a lot of discussions. Again, many submits. This is almost, you have the big ones where normally it's more clear on the press, but you have constantly discussions and submits every year to create something more clearly and more specific on the targets also for environmental issues. Here also the climate change start to be much more strong as an issue. So we in 2015 they launched the SDG programs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as a strategic actions. If you see historically, you have the first Agenda 21 with 4 sections, was even not goals. Then you have the Millennium Declaration with 8 targets, and now you have more specific goals. And it's if you see, it's double the amount of topics. Let's say this each global agreement. So there is this evolution of trying to be more specific in how to target this with indicators. The Sustainable Development Goals also is another a huge document as the IPCC that I mentioned before, that I recommend that it's huge. I know few people that read entirely, and if you read, you cannot memorize all, but I really recommend that you go for it. It's will be a little bit the homework if I manage to finish a little bit early as I planned, to go for these 2 documents and see what's written there, because most of you can also bring your own experience here, but it's very common that you have a lot of people criticizing those big agreements without never have been really going to read at least part or understand the structure and what are and how they are really structured as a global document. To arrive in a global document is very difficult process, and those documents are normally very huge, so people do not go for the document, but they criticize a lot, and they basically criticize only the graphic, that the graphic design, which is a kind of way that United Nations or the other big organizations have to promote or to disseminate the idea of what they are planning. So Sustainable Development Goals is already a much bigger document which have indicators. There are many projects that they just study the document per se, because there is also contradictions between the indicators. Sometimes you see here you have 17 documents, and sometimes the indicators of peace, for example, some indicator there can contradict or can be like antagonist of industry, innovation, and infrastructure, for example. Because though here we have many work packages working separately, and the idea is interconnect them, and they are interconnected, but also happen that things pass. Don't forget, people that do policy, they are like people in other normal professional sets, and mistakes occurs. You really have documents where you have like a clear contradiction, or conceptually, or really an impact of one indicator increasing the other, also wished but decreasing because of these contradictions. So here we have already 17 goals. We have, you see here the evolution of this differentiation between poverty and hunger, and that's true. That is very very important. This can be, for example, if you look for Latin America, hunger was in the 20 years ago, 2 decades ago, this was hunger was an issue, but in many countries this was not the main issue anymore. Even though there is hunger in those countries, the poverty was much more stronger than the hunger issue here. So with this, you could already see and check many other social or sustainability programs that embrace this different kind of context. So that's why the decision of having differentiation between poverty and hunger, even though there are, of course, many connections, we can say that most of the time, but not always, most of the time, people that have hunger, they are in a poverty situation. Not always when you have poverty, you are in a hunger situation, especially nowadays with the food industry being very diversified and offering so many empty calories. And here we come then for the problem of global obesity, which is also can call it as a hidden hunger. I don't know if you already hear about this concept. Those are the documents that I will share. Hidden hunger is exactly the obesity. Your body is still hunger. It has still have hunger. It's still hungry, but you have calories enough, and you can be obese then, or overweight, whatever. So here about hunger concept, there is also a lot of evolution and how it can be considered. Also the concept of food security here also have a parallel development, bringing this 4 key dimensions of food security. This will be all bring on those documents. I could be just the lecture talking about the food security and the evolution of the food security agenda and hunger issues, so I will not focus on it. I will keep looking the environmental aspect here, but there's a lot to be saying in terms of hunger and food security and nutrition. So you differentiate here how, if you look 2 and 3, you differentiate also the hunger from the health. Then you have education, continue being in all those documents. You have education as one of the key strategic goal, because the education can target all the others simultaneously. You have gender equality, continue with this here. And here it's also talk about minorities, but you see there is already a less focus. The minorities is more distribute and another goals, for example, peace. So continuing the second. 7 is affordable and clean energy. 8 is decent work and economic growth. So here the economic growth already get a very clear link with work conditions and work issues, are still connected with social issues, but more different, more separate. 9, you have industry, innovation in infrastructure, which is one of the most criticized. It's a very big, one of the biggest groups with indicators that can contradict the others, the other goals. You have reduced inequalities. Here also minorities appear again, and now separated of gender. sustainable city and communities, climate action. Climate also is the first time that climate came as one on goal, because here the pressure of climate change grows a lot. Also the public knowledge grows a lot in terms of climate action, and the impacts start to be seen. Life below water, life on land. You see here you have like 3 goals already for environmental issues, which were different than the Millennium Declaration, which has just 1 and 8. And then finally, peace, justice is strongest in the strong institutions. Here we also can discuss more in deep if you have questions, because our projects and experience focus a lot on zero hunger and poverty, climate action. We have many projects in climate change. You see this on the examples that I will bring. And peace building. We have a big project in Colombia trying to combine strategies, land use strategies, for example, that target climate mitigation and peace building. And finally, as the others, we always have a goal or section or target that brings about how to do those previous goals by developing partnerships or structures to implement them. Any question? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, about these topics, for example, poverty, how do you measure them? Because I know that it's not so easy to identify someone as like in a situation of poverty, because it's usually not, for example, in indigenous groups, it is not so easy because there is not like trade systems, like it is not about money, it's about quality of life. So how in a project you can approach these variables, for example, in this cultural context?
Yeah, I can stop here and show you how the indicators, how they bring the indicators and how they measure. Even though this is normally there is like recommendations and uniform methods. I will bring more the example here for hunger, where we use then measures to see if hunger has changed more than poverty. For poverty, you have the common measurements of the national measurements, which, as you brought already as example, most of the time or many times can exclude indigenous communities, especially those ones, for example, that are in more extreme locations or more like remote locations. So normally those are more extreme, and also the parameters are for study the other kind of the other kind of structures or social structures as we have in the cities, for example, and they are not adequate to study the indigenous population, also because the goal is not that they are integrated in our own structure, but that they have their own. For poverty, I can show you maybe here the documents. For hunger, you have different kind of measurements. For example, we see also this on the project. You have anthropometric measurements. For example, how high your weight and how this is expected, especially, for example, for children, to prevent stunting or anemia. For example, if it's blood sent, then you have anemia measurements, and normally the iron measurement and the weight, that was the word that I want. The weight and the height are the three key, in terms of body development, are the three key measurements to identify nutrition and hunger. There is also one specific questionnaire that I can show you. It's proposed by FAO, of course, in those questionnaires, because it's involved a lot of perception of food. So it includes questions, for example, if you feel hunger in the last week, and then have more specific questions, like, for example, how many meals you have done in the last day. You have this kind of questions that also can be more based in your own perception, or also based on more clear numbers. So there is always questions about how it's measured, but in terms of hunger, those are the key measurements that we also use in our project. And the poverty, you have the national measurements, but from my knowledge, I don't know any specific measurements that separately collect data on poverty in indigenous community. You have a lot of articles about the topic, but not about the measurements specifically. Does anyone have the experience with the measurement of poverty in indigenous communities?
I used to work with some indigenous communities in Colombia, and it was like not measurements, but I was like talking about the identification, because it is not quite easy to identify like what is really poverty. Like for other people, they are like very poor because they don't have like money to buy things and stuff. But if you look at them, like they have a good quality of life in most of the cases, when they are not so involved in bigger societies like capitalistic societies. They have a good standard of life. So I think that is an issue, and I want to bring that up. Like it has to be adjusted to particular context, and I think you did very well, like explain it also with hunger.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's here's also a conceptual issue, because also the parameters of indigenous communities are very different than ours, and also what they own consider poverty can be also very different. You see this on the perception studies, and the social representations that we have can be very different as well. The mental models that we have about what is poverty. Thank you very much for bringing.
Yeah, and Michelle, I can also add that I think sometimes, you have this kind of ownership of assets, like when you have to get the level of poverty, or you get what you call asset index, where we use, let's say, possession, family, in communities. And I think there's some articles that suggest that these kind of assets can be can be tailored according to the society that we live in. For example, you say things like as the household has, let's say, a phone or a chair or farm equipment and those kind of things. So it's like the more a family owns, the more like the more they are rich,
Yes.
Yeah, in some samples they also say that these kind of assets help, for example, in terms of when they don't have anything, they sell these things to get, let's say, something to eat or something to buy drugs or something. So assets is also one way that we can use to gauge the level of poverty in our household.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We will also discuss this topic more with how is it possible to evaluate systemically more what is food insecurity or hunger or poverty in communities. We have one example that we use here in our research, because as you said, now you just mentioned, many times if you measure, for example, if people have eggs at home, they can say yes, then you calculate that they have a source of protein, but this source of protein is to be sold to get water. So then they don't consume these eggs. These eggs are working as cash to change other things. So those measurements can have really big failures on the deduction process. And how to see this more systemically, we will see with a very interesting experience in Tanzania, that people tell this story of how is food insecurity, and then you can see all those layers of reality, like what means have this food at home has, is for consumption, is for not consumption, or so on, especially with those very particular sets as remote communities, indigenous or not.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very good comments. Yeah, thank you very much. Good. So here we are nowadays with our global agenda of SDGs. What is a little bit already a step further to analyze those SDGs is that you can group them and see strategically how target them at the same time. So you don't need to target specifically the only hunger, but pack it as three main clusters. One is focus on economic issues, where you see here these 5 goals: the energy, the economic growth and work, you have industry infrastructure, you have reduced inequalities, and here is it connected because of the connection with decent work. That's why they pack it here somehow, how to make people prosper, but it's also can seen critically as a way to regroup in economic, social and environmental issues. But anyway, I think you also face this kind of clusters of SDGs, because working on one SDG is theoretically difficult, because you always target other objectives, and that's why it's important to analyze those contradictions and also those synergies, where one thing promote one indicator of one of the goals promote simultaneously other indicators, even though it was not specifically target for the projects or for the policies. Other transnational agreements, and here is more like continental agreements. I don't know if it's common for all of you. I think SDG is very much promoted, Paris Agreement the same. But for example, for Europe, at Europe level, we have the Green Deal, which is also a huge force, a continental force to focus on better environmental policies. And it's not only targeting European conditions, but it's also supporting other countries. They have very clear objectives or targets. For example, Germany has in this agreement is where it's declared that it wants to have by 2030, which already is not possible, less 50% of emissions, and by 2050 have a completely clean or renewable energy matrix. So here you have very clear statements of the countries, what are their objectives. There is, of course, a lot of criticize on this document too. I will also upload one document which is a comparison how the Green Deal agreement at the European level influence, and for example, the Mercosur deals, which are much less, I would say, which has much less details in terms of specifically goals and numbers, but there is also this interconnection. And the Green Deal also, it's a frame as a political level that support many policies and projects, which, for example, we are as an institute that we are connected. For example, here you have the Green Deal call for projects, for example. So this is around 20 billions from the European community, with specific open call for projects that may reduce emissions, for example, by food consumption. So here here is when you start to go to the ground and see how complex are those mechanisms. It's also, I will also put this document of just the project call from the European level, because here is also what you can see, and this call is like how those global mechanisms go to the ground and how people really can support with their work, for example, as we do, that those targets are reached, which, even though, like as I said, most of the compromise done in those documents years ago, they are not possible. I had here a small video about, let's come back, the Green Deal, just that I wanted to, oops. Yes. It's very superficial video, but you can have a little bit of more entertainment than just me looking.
The European Green Deal is Europe's new growth strategy. We have to act now.
The European Commission has prepared 3 concrete actions that will offer a strong basis for the New Deal.
I want Europe to become the first climate-neutral continent in the world by 2050.
Real benefits include zero pollution, affordable and secure energy, smarter transport, and high-quality food.
A Just Transition Fund will leverage public and private money, including with the help of the European Investment Bank.
All these will contribute to a global Green Deal. No one will be left behind.
We will deliver a sustainable Europe investment plan.
Our €1 trillion of investment would give investors confidence to make long-term decisions on environmentally responsible projects. This will mean new jobs, a cleaner environment, and a better quality of life for people.
We Europeans are ready.
You saw the video, I think looks very ideal and almost romantic, but it's true that there is a lot of support in terms of investment to be done by the institutes, and many actions can be done with this kind of agreement. Of course, there is many of the targets that we know already that will be not possible, but there is a lot of projects going on, and this kind of calls that are supported by this transnational agreements are very important. We have here specific some of the, you also saw in the video that she mentioned a green row, and you just to when you explore the documents that I will upload, you see 2 recommendations of Nature articles that talk about the different kind of paradigms that we have to develop policies in the future. So green grow is one of them. You have also degrow, and you have one that is a mix of those two. And when you do simulations and the models, for example, as Stefan was explaining you as how the models work, you see that the models also can simulate how what effects we will have as a society if we adopt more degrow policies or green grow policies. At that moment, it's much more adopted the green grow with some critics to that does not become just a reinventation or a beautiful color and the old grow concept. So there is a lot of critics about this too, but it's already much more environmentally fair agreement, the Green Deal, and had a lot of support. As I said, we are support for those kinds of agreements too. Okay. So if we have questions, because otherwise we go for a short exercise.
I would have a short question.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that it's not like there are some goals which might not be possible to reach. So I would be interested in why you think that is like that. Like, more, is it a political willingness, or what's the reasons behind that?
It's a very interesting, very complex question. I think definitely the political power could have a strong influence with the instruments that policy can bring. For example, law. You can just forbid people to do things that are increase emissions, for example. Not just, right, because then there will be a lot of discussions and so on. But you could, with law, have a big impact, and law can also be influenced by politicians and so on, and one kind of government. But I think the most is that the consumption at global level and at national level, if you look to Germany, but also in most of the countries, is something very hard to change. Like we are in a society that consumes more and more. We try to change as much as we can the technology, and then here the technology really came to add it a lot in this process to trying to do the things more clean. But we saw with Corona that we had a decrease with a pandemic that just locked down people inside of their home. We still are producing a lot, but we could saw what we are looking for. We're looking for to decrease. You have to put people inside of the house. They have stopped to travel. They have to stop to use flights and so on. It's very drastic. We had to have a global pandemic killing people, a tragedy basically to make us reduce a little. It's not even what we should reduce. So when we talk also about like perceptions and the social issues, for me, of course I don't have the key answer from all the sides. I have my own view on this, on your issue. And I think consumption is for us one of the key targets. Consumption represent many things for people, represent to be accepted, represent to be winners in life. And people need to consume to show that they arrive somewhere. This is our paradigm as society. More we have, more successful we are. I think there is this kind of the structure on the shoulders of everybody. That's why also they grow. It's very difficult to be accepted, and people feel very touched if you take any right of them, right to travel, right to take flights, whatever. So I think the process is very slow. From my own perspective, when I remember living on the Agenda 21 times, and now I see huge progress, but it's still too slow. But I see huge progress in terms of nutrition, also like how we talk about food nowadays. And I can tell you this from my own perspective, living in Europe, living in Latin America, and also working in Tanzania. So I think there is huge progress, and we always have to have this in mind to not give up, because most of the time we put the goals that we cannot reach, and also be prepared. This goes up beyond a little bit of the topic here, but Edgar Morin, I don't know if you heard about this author. He's a French philosopher, and he talks about the 7 knowledge for the future. And one of those knowledges is be prepared to uncertainty. And I think we have a lot of uncertainty coming on. We can use all the models that we have, but we have a lot of uncertainty. And more we prepare to deal with uncertainty, it does not mean improvisation. It means be open to things change, like this year. More we will be prepared in terms of knowledge for the future. Yeah. I don't know if it was some on your question. It's a very complex one.
Yeah, sure. I think it is, and I think at some point it's as well, including some opinions at some points. But I was, for example, wondering if the European Green New Deal is like setting maybe, that it is planned before to setting higher targets that they see as possible to reach, just to say afterwards, okay, at least we got like a bit further to these targets. We didn't reach them, but on the other hand, then I see not really the willingness behind to follow this kind of strategy that was set up, like in then like more concrete decisions that follow. Then that is like they are not always like really strictly following this strategy they set. So it's like sometimes maybe a bit greenwashing as well in politics, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And good that you have your eyes open for greenwashing, because it's everywhere all the time. Even sometimes unconsciously, you can go on the greenwash because you're enthusiastic with the targets and so on, and you don't see the structure behind, which is very much go for greenwash. And you see this very much as like the sports, or is only speech, because with Corona, if you imagine like that we advance on the environmental targets, but we already have like many plans how we recover our economy to go back for where we were, and it was bad. So there is a lot of contradictions if that's really what they want. And you also have all this political system, so you have different directions. There are political directions that are very clear greenwashing. Also companies and many NGOs also doing this. It's very important to have this open eyes for greenwashing. Yeah. Thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. So now we have I would do in groups or individually. I think it's easier if I put on the chat this document, so you can have a first view on the Green Deal and bring some critiques. Also, if you prefer, find yourself the SDG, it's okay. I will suggest the Green Deal because it's a little bit less global level, so already come more or less from some more like tangible agreements, less big than the SDGs. But if you want to have a look on the SDGs, you also can do this, and have 10 minutes to look on these documents of the Green Deal or the SDGs or other one that you find interesting, and present a critique, or like a critique can be positive, right? A positive or negative critique to the group. just so that you have a little bit also time to breathe and stop to just hearing me all the time. Is it fine? And you have questions about this exercise?
The documents are on Moodle, or where can I find them?
No, I will put here on the chat.
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
Trying to come back to my desktop. Okay. So. Here you have one. Oh, I just see now in the chat, nobody hear this?
We watched it on our own then, so.
Thank you. I didn't see there was this comment. I thought I should just, okay. Yeah, but it's not, cannot copy and paste. I can do this online. I'm sorry, technical problems. I'll put the link. You have the document PDF there. And you have also because I also have online. Are you tired? You need a break before the exercise?
Maybe after the exercise, since we go until 2, like we can have a break at 12 or I don't know, like more like in the middle of.
Yeah, I will also try to do a little bit shorter than 2, but
Okay, nice.
to do anyways, we have a little bit break.
Can I ask a question concerning the exercise?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. So, what exactly we're supposed to do? The way I understood it, we have to read the papers and then find its strengths and weaknesses.
Sorry, just copy and paste wrong here. There was not the link. The idea is that you have a look and bring your critics. This is just to have a little break of the logic of the structure of the lecture, that you can also yourself get some information and bring your opinion, critique it positively or negatively.
Okay. I was just wondering how much time we have for that, because
That's just overview. I planned more or less 10 minutes that you can have a first look on the documents, but if you need more time, you also can tell me, and I give you extra 10 minutes.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Here. I don't know why I cannot put the link. But if you Google this, summary of analysis of agreement between European Union and Mercosur, you have directly there the document.
We can also choose like to look at like the SDG framework or something like that as well.
Yeah,
right?
or the Paris agreement or any other agreement, political agreement that you think that is interesting.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Is everybody there?
Hey, yeah.
Good. Very good. Okay, so now we have a short part, and then we will continue for today. We'll probably have short then, but on the next in the next lecture we have very long. Today we have those first part and still exercise, but we can integrate this exercise in the exercise on the next block. So I will share here. Okay. You're here. Okay. So how it works? Is everybody seeing my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
So we saw until now this global agenda where these big agreements are done and where the policy is framed. After having this big block, you can focus on the national environment policy, which is a policy where you can then have specific tools or mechanisms that each government use to implement their own environmental strategies. And you also have on this scheme indicators or instruments that you use to make effective your target. There are different categories. You can have regulatory instruments, it's law, that you put fees for the people to change their behavior, for example, in terms of emission or consumption. You have market-based instruments, you have voluntarily instruments, and you have also just information-based instruments. So as a concept, as just to have a definition here that we bring, environmental policy is a plan, an action, or a principle. Is a more broad concept that it's used by a government in general. We will discuss here in the third block. We will discuss also together with the participation of Luca, what is governance and what is governance done by government governance, or market governance or community-based governance, for example. But in the case here, we are following the formal structure of governance by government. So the policy here is proposed by the government, or can also be only settled as a particular initiative of, for example, business or companies or people. But we are focused here and analyzing today the governmental policies. And it's regard, of course, very, very obvious, it's try to avoid pollution from natural resources like air, water, soil, but can also be target-based management or ecosystems management or biodiversity and so on. The idea is that the policy can avoid the tragedy of commons, and as I said before, which is that the one individual self-interest is generating negative externality for the others. So we have a collective resources that should be preserved. And I will bring here, I don't know, just one example, because also the frame that I'm bringing is very much centered in the rights of the people of have a healthy environment. But for example, in Bolivia, you have the first constitution that bring the nature as an element that has rights. So we have different kind of laws and structure. This is a very interesting case, can be also one of your analysis for the term paper if you want. It's this kind of government structures. It does also include the constitution, because this is where the nature is included as very unique constitution in terms of environmental rights, and the idea is that there the nature also have its own rights. But the ideas of environmental policy then is avoid the tragedy of commons and and promote governance of commons. Here, governance of commons, I will call, of course, Eleanor Ostrom. I don't know if you already heard about her. If someone has some knowledge about this theory. She got a Nobel Prize about this theory, and this will be the base also for the discussion on the third block. Okay. So, policy instruments. You have the, sorry, this is located here. So first, the arrangement. As I said before, you have the policy. Just here, it's very important that you have clear the differentiation of those terms, because normally people mix a lot. We saw this a lot also with the colleagues also in the work, but within the students, even people that are doing PhD on the topic, sometimes they do that mix. This mix is very important also that you have learned this to differentiate. Policy is more a direction or a broad intent, the objective that we have, for example, greenhouse gas emissions to reduction, for example. The program is already the part, compound the policy, and this is the strategy, the framework to achieve this broad intent that the policy brings. Here, for example, you have one program for this green gas emissions reduction is, for example, a specific program that can be done by the industry, for example, or by the countries. As I said before, I have here the link. Let's see if I can. Here, I don't know if you hear about the RED mechanisms. Also, this is a program, a global program to reduce emissions from deforestation, and it's a mechanism for the developed country pay the developing countries to reduce the emission and to do reforestation in basic words. Here in this link, you have like also more information. Here you have the example how it works, for example, in Paraguay. I will put to you, and then we also can criticize and see the video also with critical eyes as you have done before in the other documents. I have to share how I share the audio, right? Sorry. Does anybody can help me with share the audio?
We still see your slides, so I think you have to unshare your slides and then share the video first.
Okay.
But it's actually, if you go on your top bar, you see like I share slides like the greeny thing, and then you can click on options, and when you click on it, there should be the option to share your sound as well.
And, the slide, right. Oh. Okay. Well, here I have again. I cannot see. Okay, I will let it the link on the chat, and you can have a look on a little bit how the RED mechanisms work. In one example in Paraguay, of course, it's also advertised of the program, but it's the RED mechanisms, for example, is how you can see the example how a program work inside of a policy. And I will also put on the Moodle a very interesting article that I really recommend, that criticize a little bit the RED mechanism as a colonialism strategy, yeah, or framed on the colonialist logic. And then you have specific plans where are aspect of a program. So it's very much target like some population or some region. So here you see what you see here. It's how all the structure come from the policy, which is more broad, and how it comes to be implemented on the ground. So in those plans, you have different kind of instruments. For example, if you go for a plan which is based on market instruments, you can have taxation, emission trades. You can also have remove of some perceived incentives. You have liability rules. You have deposit refunding. There is also when it's market based. You also have policy instruments that are non-market based, and here you have this command control regulation, which is also framed in for example, when you forbid people to do some of pollution activities, for example, industry and so on. Here's clearly command regulation. You have no negotiation. You just have a rule or a law that forbid you to do some activities. You have reporting requirements. You have activity green technology support. This is very much seen nowadays. Many of the examples of, for example, cars that are less that are electric cars, for example, come from this logic as implementation of policies. You have removal of green tech financial barriers, also information and voluntarily approach. Here is more like free approach campaigns that people done, or the government also done as part of the policy implementation, which is with the clear target of inform the population. Then you have the policy cycle, and here you see a little bit where Stefan also brought the evaluation of the policy. How you develop a policy. You first define the problems, then you identify the options. This scheme you see also for the examples that I will show that will work. So you have first the problem definition, the identification of the options, and they evaluate the options. Here is, for example, also the examples that the articles presented yesterday, last week brought. For example, the modeling, how much impact this option, for example, decrease the consumption of something we will have. So here is how you evaluate. This can be, in this case, ex ante, but you also can evaluate ex ante when you already have the impacts there. So here you have cost benefits analysis, modeling, and all those approach that you saw specifically with Stefan. So you implement the choice option, you monitor outcomes, you evaluate outcomes, review and modify or terminate, or you redefine the problem and come again on the cycle of policy making. And for the stakeholder consultation, which we also will see here more clearly, you normally involve them on the definition of problem, especially with transdisciplinary approach, and the identification of the options and the evaluation of the options. When you evaluate the outcomes, of course, here is critical to consult the stakeholder, because normally they are the parts involved on the policy implementation. So here you have overview how is it implemented from the conceptual point of view. With the examples on the ground, you see more clear how we do the implementations of those policies. In our case, already the plan, because we are people that are already on the ground trying to implement and have impact. Good. So here is an exercise that we will not do today. I try to take this here. But you can already have in mind for the next block. We will think about policies that you know and which kind of instruments they use to be implemented. So we'll focus on this development of these three parts of the policy cycle. Just an introduction of what is coming in the next lectures. We will talk about why environmental policies failed. So in the sources that I'm sharing with you as a base for the knowledge of this lecture, we have three key issues. Of course, there is a lot of suppositions theory and studies about why policy fails. There is a fail, and also there is also a lot of different kind of failures. So this is also important to highlight. But in general, we say that normally what happens is the policy can be well designed, but the process of application, so the programs and the plans, are not effective. There is probably a gap in the mutual coordination. It means that people that design the policies are the ones that are implemented, and this gap between those levels of implementation might be one of the crucial issues that make a policy failure. So what is important here is that this channel of communication between the parties and the levels of policies are well integrated. And here it's important that we have then an appropriate agency of implementation, that people feel somehow also honored of the targets. And what we normally see is that most of the time we have many conflicts that not appear when the conflicts that implementation on the ground cannot appear when the policy is being implementation. That's why this integration, it's on the policy development, it's very important. But sometimes here you have other examples of issues that make that helps that a policy failure. But what is important to know, there is a lot of mechanisms to integrate people in the several levels of the policy implementation. For example, if you are on the policy development, we already talked about here in the beginning about the minorities and how they are integrated on those big or how they should be integrated on those big agreements. But also after that, because we know that it's not so far not always possible that they are on the policy development, even though this is the desirable. You have also the possibility to, when the policy is already designed and be implemented, you can much better integrate with people on the ground, in the communities. That's how we work. That's all the studies that I specifically have been done, is to how not failure to communicate with the affected community by the policy and by the problem that the policy is targeting. So this is the start already of the next block, where we'll see all these uncertainties and how people communicate, and how we can use social learning as approach to better integrate those views and perceptions of environmental problems. I will not enter on this today. As I said, today we finish a little bit earlier. I will just give you now some minutes that we can summarize what we learned today, and that you also can bring your comments about the lecture, or questions or critics. Now I can have more like free dialogue with you.
I have one question concerning the exercise we had to do. Would it be an adequate example for criticism that one says that due to wrong incentives, it can lead to a shift from one sector to another, and therefore it does not improve the environmental effects?
Can you repeat the example? I'm not sure if I capture well.
As for example, there are distributional effects if we have a single carbon price for all sectors. And this also, there can be the wrong change in between different sectors, and
Yes.
in the end it does not lead to an improvement. This
Yes.
also would be an example, because I wasn't 100% sure if I got the exercise right.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is even further already. What I put on the exercise, it's more that you identified, for example, a policy that you found interesting for the better, for the good, and you can decide if it's more based on regulatory instruments or market-based instruments or voluntarily. It's very simple.
No, at the moment I'm not talking about the exercise we are going to do, but the exercise we did this lecture.
Yes, I mean, again, not sure if I understood, but I think for the if you use the example of the carbon, for example, taxations, if it's the same, it's a uniform taxation, this is for sure, of course, one of the failures, one of the topics for failure, because also how people do a taxation of carbon in developing countries, and it's always the claim is this, right? We have the right to still have our carbon portion because we didn't use this. We are still using to develop. So, for example, that's normally how those this balance of implementation of carbon taxations work. So I would say yes, as a perfect example.
Okay, thank you. And could you please tell me again the text about the problem with the colonialism? Which is it?
In
which
the red
document?
Yeah, and the red mechanisms I will upload on the Moodle, and I will I will have a specific folder about this criticism where you can find in the colonialism.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, it's about this instruments in Latin America especially.
Okay.
No, thank you for the interest. Good. Any other comments, questions? How do you what do you bring for this last 2 hours?
I guess my comment would just be that it's incredibly frustrating, just because I also work in policy, that it's a good thing that I guess the intentions are good, but it's constantly, I'm faced with the idea that it's like, it feels so wrong that we're doing this, because it's like, it's not like our gender equality systems are that great. It's not like we have so many subsets of like people impoverished and child hunger, even in developed countries. So it just seems so hypocritical all the time to constantly be doing this. So I just find myself often just getting very angry.
Yeah, I can imagine. I share also the feeling. It's the same for science, that trying to somehow also support the policy implementation, analyzing the things. You also have to write papers and so on, and the problems are so more urgent on it, and all the time and energy that you have to invest to write something, to not directly influence on the problem, just this, to be always convince yourself that okay, it's take time, it's a small part of the process. This is really frustrating. I completely agree with you. What more comments, questions? Do you have anything that you would like to see more, or the thing, or some critics to the topics, or to the methodology of learning that we have now?
I'd love if you, just any papers that you can suggest about sort of these topics, even like if they're not required readings, but just the good papers that you know about I don't know, sort of like decolonial policies and things like that. I would very much appreciate to be able to read up on and be better informed about talking about these type of topics, because I feel like I have an idea, but I want to be able to dive deeper into it.
That's very good. I see the decolonization and colonization. It's very, yeah, got a lot of attention. I will even investigate more in my material, that I cannot do the basics, but a little bit further. Further articles that we can discuss. Also, we can bring this and the next block. I think you also can see a little bit this process of, at least a little bit, intent of decolonization with this social learning approach, that you integrate these different logics of other countries and give more power on the implementation process. Not ideal, but it's already a open channel for do less colonial in the approach. Thank you very much for the interest. I will bring more. I will put a specific folder then with this. And for the next block, also you have one article to read about social learning. It's not a lot, and then you have also optional. I know you had a lot of online normally and a lot of things to read, but I will put some further and one obligatory article to read. Good. Okay. Any other comment? It was new for you, the information, like how interesting it was. It was most of you already know all the logic behind the historical process of the agenda development.
I already knew about the historic behind the agenda process, but it was new to me how like it is adopted, like from policies to a plan. And I also think it was quite interesting to deal with the text and to search for criticism in those.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's very good to know, the exercise, because the exercise was designed especially this year because of the online possibility, because normally face-to-face we not always have everybody with a computer, so I mostly do other exercise, but it's good if it was interesting.
Yeah, and I also think it's nice to have like a hands-on look at like actual policy, and maybe even in the future we could like try looking at like the actual documents, you know. And I think that's an interesting perspective to take, because like the legally binding document itself, I'm pretty sure at least for like European level legislature, it's like pretty much available openly and we can just download the PDF, and it would be cool to look at the actual like words that they use and like the keywords that like make a particular like treaty like binding or not, and we could like also criticize like the language itself of the policy, you know. I know that's getting quite in depth, but I think that's also nice to see.
No, it's very nice. It's very great suggestion. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was basically done, but yeah, I think that would be it's also interesting. I mean, it is, of course, like sometimes it can be dry when you look at like the really, because there are hundreds of pages sometimes, but I think it's important as people who are interested in like the policy side of environmental action that we need to like be familiar with like these like kind of thick documents, you know.
Yes, it's very, very important. I think if you yourself are in a course that are open to understand better environmental policy, we have to have a look on those key documents. As I said, like, doesn't make sense if we criticize without never had a short look at least, and on those big agreements, or also more transnational, or even the plans or program that they bring with.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comment, suggestion, thing that you want to know more, or was new for you? Okay. So then I will work and upload all the texts, also according what you are interested in, what you bring here. For the next lecture, we will more go on the ground on the implementation of plan and programs. And I will be, of course, available in the forum or by email. You also can contact me. And we will see each other then on 4th of January. I think everybody know the schedule. I suppose that also Stefan already talked about you, the 21 and 28. There is no lectures. And then we have again a meeting on 4th of January and the new year. Is it fine for everybody?
Yes.
Good. So I wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and see you next year.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All the best
Thank
to you. Have a good Happy New Year. Bye bye.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
My name is Isa Yusuf. I am
Yeah.
Erasmus student. I have really enjoyed the lecture. I have learned a lot. Thank you very much, and I'll put in much effort to make sure that everything will go in the right way for me.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very glad to know. Thank you very much.
Please,
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Have a good break. Have a good break. Bye bye.
Okay, bye. Please, when should we submit the assignment?
Yes.
On which date is the last deadline for submission? The assignment.
The term paper. You mean the term paper?
The exercise.
The exercise we'll discuss just orally in the next. You don't need to submit. We will just get back on it on the next lecture. Don't worry, and you just have to have your own example, but you don't need to submit this anywhere.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.
Professor, just a doubt. Are you going to upload this PowerPoint?
Yes, I will upload the entire block of lectures. You see until where I was today, and the next lectures will be already in one block.
Oh, perfect. To repass it during break.
Great.
Will be good. Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's too.
Thank you very much. Happy Christmas. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.